Well, our next guest is a bit unusual in his style and in his name and in his background, but he's one of the most eloquent defenders of free speech you'll ever meet. His name is Mark Meekin, but he goes by the funny online nickname Count Dankula. He's very alternative, even down to his tattoos and piercings. He doesn't look like your typical political activist for freedom, or maybe he does, I don't know these days. A couple of years back, Meekin played a practical joke on his girlfriend.
My girlfriend is always ranting and raving about how cute and adorable her wee dog is, and so I thought I would turn him into the least cute thing that I could think of, which is a Nazi.
Sieg Heil. Sieg Heil. Who's a good wee Nazi?
Well, he did just that. Obviously, it was a joke, a weird joke, a risque joke, a joke you can find funny or unfunny. It's up to you, but you have to know that was a joke. Meekin's not a Nazi, and neither is his girlfriend's dog. Dogs can't be Nazis, actually. But Meekin was prosecuted for that video and convicted and sentenced to an £800 fine. Because apparently the UK has solved the rest of its crime spree, ranging from acid attacks to outright terror bombing, so they can go after goofy practical joke videos that they don't think are funny. Well, Meekin has become a bit of a free speech crusader since then. Here he is speaking at a Day for Freedom rally in London earlier this year.
In the aftermath of what happened, I've decided to keep fighting to protect free speech, because after seeing my mother repeatedly crying at the fact that her son could get sent to prison just because he hurt some people's feelings, that was more than enough for me to want to make sure that what happened to me doesn't happen to anyone else. And because I want to protect free speech, I have been branded a racist, a Nazi, and a white supremacist. And that I am part of the alt-right. To set the record straight, I reject any notion of superiority or inferiority based on race. I reject the idea of an ethno-state. If you want to live here in peace and not only respect the freedom of others, but fight to protect the freedom of others, then you are welcome in this country.
Well, I saw that speech. It was amazing. And I saw in the news more recently that the European Union is considering banning what are called memes. Now, memes are those little shareable, funny images with a few keywords on them and a funny picture that are fun to post on Facebook or Twitter or other social media. They would literally ban memes, this Article 13 of the European Union's new proposals, and sharing memes in the name of copyright theft that would be banned. Well, that couldn't be twisted for censorship reasons, could it? And joining us now live via Skype from near Glasgow, Scotland, is Mark Meekin. Welcome to the show. Nice to have you here. We're fans of your free speech crusade, and it's nice to have you on the program.
Thanks very much, man. It's good to be here.
Well, thank you for the time. I thought you were the guy to talk to because this new proposal by the European Union called Article 13, there may be some noble public policy goal underneath it to reward content creators with the fruits of their labor. I get that as a content creator. I bet you do too. But it sounds like it could be abused to go after anyone who posts a funny image. It could be writ large the same malicious prosecution you underwent for your YouTube video. That could theoretically happen to anyone who shares something on Facebook or Twitter? Am I overstating things?
Well, at the moment, they're saying that it's going to be used for copyright, but I guarantee you in the future it's going to be used for things like speech. That is, if something is offensive, or, even if it's just a joke that's a little bit too edgy, then things like that, they're going to be subject to these exact same restrictions. Right now, it's starting with copyright, but I promise you in the next few years, it's just going to be used for all kinds of speech that they don't approve of.
One way of looking at it is that anyone on the internet, almost no matter what you say or do, would break this rule. So we're all guilty under this rule, and then it just comes down to who do they choose to charge, because every one of us retweets or shares something on Facebook. So, as you say, who they go after, eventually, of course it will be a political tool. Of course it will be a censorship tool, even if it doesn't start off that way, because that's a way to get anyone, isn't it?
Well, the way that they're doing it as well is it's not going to be the end user like me. It's not going to be the user. It's going to be the platforms that get punished. So basically, even if we get angry about our content being removed, we're going to be screaming and screeching at the platforms when it's not actually their fault. They just have to comply with this legislation. So basically, it's the EU that have done it, but it's the platforms themselves that are going to get the brunt of the blame.
When you say the platforms, you're referring to YouTube and Twitter and Facebook, the places, these electronic digital town squares, as I've heard others refer to them. That's a phrase that Jack Dorsey of Twitter uses. I think, though, you're right. It's the government behind it, but I think that the companies are only too happy to do the bidding of governments. I think there's a lot of log rolling, a lot of favors exchanged. YouTube, Facebook, Twitter do a favor for the government, and in return the government maybe goes easy on them for their tax structures, for other things. I mean, I sense that while these companies claim to be independent, they actually love doing business with governments, especially authoritarian governments.
Oh, it's absolutely. See the EU itself. The legislation that gets proposed to the EU comes from big tech, big corporations, and lobbying groups that are sponsored by them. Basically, if any of these big corporations want legislation to get put through, then they can go forward and propose it, and it will get put through. And I think that big tech obviously might end up needing to pay fines. They're going to need to adopt algorithms and spend some money to police the platforms better. But in the long term, that they win, because small companies aren't subject to the legislation, but when they reach a certain size, then they are subject to the legislation, which means that they'll either, they need to adopt algorithms. There literally is no way to hire enough staff to monitor the sheer amount of content that gets posted online. So all that happens is small companies need to stay small, so they're not subject to the regulations because they simply can't afford to abide by them, or they try and end up just getting completely buried financially, which means that the big tech that are at the top, their place is now secure. They'll take a little bit of a hit monetarily, but in the long run they benefit because no one's going to be able to compete with them now.
That's a very thoughtful point of view. The incumbents will set up barriers to entry for future competitors. They'll be happy to have this restriction. And as we see with Google doing business with China, I was reading about Sergey Brin, the founder of Google, who left the former Soviet Union when he was a young child with his family. They left in the 70s, which was very rare, very hard to do. And his family took him out of the Soviet Union because it was authoritarian. They wanted to be free. And that instinct of freedom is what made Google pull back from China the first time round. But he's overcome that. I guess maybe $50 billion in the bank, and the thought of colonizing China overcame any pangs in his conscience. So Google's going back into China. They're working with the Chinese dictatorship on a search engine. I bet, and I'd like your thought on this, Mark, I bet some of the technology, the censorship technology, the detection technology that Google and others are developing to comply with China's censorship is going to be deployed in what we used to call the Free West. So instead of our freedom being a virus that infects their statist authoritarian system, it's the other way. Their authoritarian surveillance state will be the virus that infects us. Is that an accurate description of what's happening?
I believe it would be. I think Google have done it because they've just basically, where is a place where we can test this out, where we're not going to get yelled at too much because it's considered the norm? China, the best place for them to test this out. So yeah, I would believe that. I reckon that they're basically going over to China to adopt the same policies as China, and they're going to go, oh no, we need to comply with the national laws. We don't agree with it, but we need to comply. It's a test. They're testing their software so that they can apply it to the West.
Yeah. I can't remember which Soviet dissident it was, if it was Solzhenitsyn or someone who said that the capitalists in the West will sell the rope by which they are hanged. As in, I'd have to look up the exact quote, but I think you've probably heard that one before, Mark, which is, these multi-billion, in some case, trillion-dollar companies in Silicon Valley, which is in California, the freest place in the world, their lust for that Chinese market, their lust to get along with the governments of the EU, in a way is planting the seeds of censorship that would strangle the industry itself. I mean, tech and communications technology and social media is only possible with freedom of speech and freedom of thought, really. But these companies would sell their own hangman, the noose by which they're hung. That was true in the Soviet era. I think it's true in the Chinese communist era too, don't you think?
Yeah, it's not a shocker to me. Like, I used to be surprised by such things, but see how people like this basically putting morals before money. Yeah, well, money before morals, should I say? And then it's a case of they don't understand the destructive path that they are going down. All they can see is the dollar signs. Mm-hmm. That's all they can see. Like, even in the EU Parliament, when Article 13 got voted in, the people we spoke to, they didn't even know what they were voting for. Yeah. We were just sort of like, do you have any idea what you've just done? And when we explained some of the ramifications of it, they seemed shocked. Even Axel Voss himself said that he was surprised by what was in the legislation that he proposed.
Yeah.
It's just like these are people that have no understanding or grasp of the internet, but they want to seek to control it above all else, even if they don't understand its culture.
Well, it's incredible that 2 years after Brexit, the EU is still promulgating laws that'll touch you in the United Kingdom. Can I ask you about your own case? I mean, you fought a bizarre application of a censorship law, came after you in a malicious application, and I think, that's why you're so good to talk about this, because you have been there when a law that maybe looked reasonable on the books was animated by radical social justice warriors and inflicted on you. Now, I think you were kept whole by crowdfunding, and it turned you into a bit of a warrior. I don't think you had a big profile before. I mean, you had a profile, but it wasn't big like it is now. Can I ask you if you've continued your free speech fight, and if so, how, since your own trial ended?
It's basically spreading awareness in regards to these laws. Obviously, the part I was convicted under was Section 127 of the 2003 Communications Act, and it was the section that says an online or public posting that is grossly offensive, and what someone might find grossly offensive is completely subjective. It's down to the individual, but apparently the courts decided that grossly offensive now has a matter-of-fact set definition when it absolutely doesn't, and I was still convicted under it. But another few things that I'm doing as well is I went to the EU recently in the EU Parliament to speak about the dangers of Article 13. It basically is baby steps towards authoritarianism. China didn't happen overnight. And also I've joined UKIP, the UK Independence Party, because out of all the political parties in Britain that have any kind of clout, UKIP is the only one that cares about freedom of speech. All the other parties are seeking to restrict it. UKIP are the only party that are seeking to protect it.
Very interesting. Well, listen, it's a pleasure to talk with you. I could listen to that beautiful Scottish brogue all day long. I'm only half joking, and as I've told our viewers, your speech of the day for freedom was so powerful and such a clarion call for free speech. It truly struck me. It's nice to meet you, and I hope that you're part of the successful pushback against Article 13, but I remain a pessimist in this war for freedom against the tech companies. It's just a handful of small guys like us versus these titans of industry. Let me ask you in closing, are you an optimist or a pessimist? I'm a pessimist. What are you?
I'm trying my best to maintain that we're going to get the same ending as David versus Goliath. We just need a good stone.
Yeah. Well, from your mouth to God's ears, I like your attitude. I like that you've still got lots of fight in you. Nice to meet you, Mark. Good to have you on the show today.
You too, man. Thanks very much.
All right. There you have it. Mark Meekin joining us via Skype from his home near Glasgow, Scotland. That's an excerpt from my daily show, The Ezra Levant Show, weekdays at 8 p.m. Eastern. Every day I do a monologue, interview a guest, and read my fan mail and my hate mail. To subscribe, go to therebel.media/shows.